Oh, f1.8. Full frame. F1.8. Full frame. Oh, I'm gonna get everything in focus. From that rock all the way down to the sea. Wait. What? That poor unfortunate photographer over there, he's suffering with a condition that I like to call bronchitis. He's bought himself a 50mm f1.8 lens to go on his full frame camera. And now he's got a problem. The only aperture available on full frame, as we know, according to markers from Photography Online, is f1.8. He's blowing his highlights out at any shutter speed less than a 64,000th of a second, and his depth of field is non-existent. But I'm here to show him the way. A better way. The Micro Four Thirds way. You see, over here on the dark side of YouTube, Micro Four Thirds, we have all kinds of apertures available to us, including but not limited to f4, 5.6, and even f8. I know, it's crazy, right? And the depth of field is incredible. We have so much depth of fieldy goodness. I have depth of field I could spare to the full frame photographers out there. I don't need it all, it's just so much of it is there. So let's take some photos using the depth of field goodness that a Micro Four Thirds camera provides. So I've got my very pathetic and very unprofessional Micro Four Thirds camera set up here. I'm using the 6mm lens that I have, which gives a dirty full frame equivalent view of a 12mm lens. And at f5.6, I'm getting this rock here. Here we go. I'm wet already. Let's get it while the water's rushing out. I'm getting this rock down here in focus, and I'm also getting the light beacon at the end of this rock wall in focus as well. At f5.6. I mean, on full frame, you'd be down at f57 to get depth of field like that, wouldn't you? It's just an incredible thing where you can shoot at such wide apertures, letting all of that light in so your shutter speeds are quite reasonable for this kind of photography, but you're also getting the depth of field. I've taken 3 or 4 different pictures there. I'll show the best one to you. Now, there is more to photography than this look right here. So this has been recorded on a full frame camera and a 50mm lens at f1.8. And you can't see anything in the background. Why do we need that? I shoot a lot of landscape photography, I shoot a lot of seascape photography. I don't need shallow depth of field. What I need, believe it or not, is depth of field. So what might work for you in the full frame land doesn't necessarily work for me over here in Micro Four Thirds land. I'm well aware that the last photograph was taken with a really wide angle lens, and there will be somewhere somebody will go, yes, but you're using a very wide lens. You get a very large depth of field with a very wide lens. So I've switched to the Olympus 12-40 Pro here. We're going to stand up on this rock wall and take another photograph. And I'm going to show you that I don't need the depth of field because I want to get as much of this rock wall in focus as I possibly can. And we're going to shoot at f2.8, which is a really wide aperture. And on full frame, that will give a reasonably blurry background. But I don't want a reasonably blurry background. I want it all in focus, so I'm using Micro Four Thirds. Ah man, I always hate standing up here. It just feels so sketchy, especially when the tide's coming in. There's just waves crashing around everywhere. The beach on this side of the rock wall is a little bit higher than the other side, so there's about 18 feet of water at the other side of this and waves crashing around everywhere. This side, not so much. So I'm at f2.8 and I've got the 10-stop filter on, and we're down at a second. Now I've got all of this rock wall in focus, but I'm kind of wondering if it needs a polarizer. The rock wall in front of me, it's all wet and it's a little bit shiny, and maybe the polarizer will cut through that for this image. I think that's somewhere that we're going to go. But I always find a second and a half, somewhere around there. I prefer that look for this kind of photography than completely smoothing out the water. I could throw the aperture down on this towards f8, f9, f10, really flatten out the water, but I find that looks a little bit boring these days. So somewhere around the second and a second and a half. It just leaves a little bit of texture in the water. It smooths out the motion so it doesn't look quite so harsh, but it just smooths out the water a little bit. I think we'll grab the polarizer. I'll be back with you in 2 seconds. So here we go. I forgot I had the GoPro in the bag, so I can bring you up here with me and you can see what I mean about the tide at the other side of this rock wall. It is just so much higher than it is down towards my left. Yeah, I forgot I had the GoPro, so I can bring you up here. I was going to leave you down there, but here we go. So I've put the polarizing filter on now, and the polarizing filter, I kind of think of it as a one-stop filter in a sense. It does lose a little bit of light, but for a long exposure, that's now got me to 1.6 seconds, which is fantastic, and that's just a little bit slower than it was before, so just a little bit more smoothing of the water. So let's go ahead. We'll use the 2-second timer. The settings are exactly the same as before, apart from the shutter speed that I've mentioned, of course. And, well, here's the photograph. f2.8, front to back sharpness, something you can't do on full frame, despite full frame being, you know, the dogs. Here it is. Right, so I've spun the camera around 90 degrees and you can see this other sea defence here. Well, the tide's come in and the waves are crashing up against it. You'll be able to see behind me that they're doing that. And I thought long exposure, as a wave crashes right against it, you get all that smoke and the mist and everything. It might make for quite a fun, contrasty black and white photograph. We've got a little bit of the cliff in the background. That's the Yorkshire coast that is currently crumbling away into oblivion. Let's see what we can do with this one. So I've stopped the aperture down now to f8, which is giving us a 2-second exposure, which is hopefully going to create some nice smoky turbulence in the water as it crashes against the rocks. I've still got the 10-stop filter on and I'm still using the polarizer. The rocks that are getting crashed about, they're a little bit wet and shiny, so we're just going to cut through some of that using the polarizing filter. Down at ISO 200, base ISO of this camera, but here we go. Here's a wave crashing against it using the 2-second timer. Hopefully that's got it. That looks great. Here's that photograph. All right, so I kind of thought a blurry background would be a kind of fitting ending to this video. So, to sum up where I stand on all of this, I don't see the argument for full frame being able to shoot at f1.8 and get a really blurry background as being any real kind of argument. It's possible to get blurry backgrounds on Micro Four Thirds. It's a fact of life. You're gonna have to get over that. But f1.8, it's not feasible all of the time, is it? You're not going to come out in broad daylight like this and shoot everything at f1.8 because blurry background. You're not going to go out and shoot landscapes in the Alps or in Iceland at f1.8 because it's not feasible. And at the same time, why are we shooting apertures wide open when apertures wide open tend to be a little bit soft? And is that not an argument for full frame? Expensive lenses, really sharp. So why are you shooting your expensive lenses wide open at the softest aperture? A previous comment on a previous video, which I found really amusing, was apparently 50mm f1.8s are cheap cameras on full frames or cheap lenses. It was something along the lines of something being a cheap lens on full frame. And that just kind of made me laugh a little bit because this Olympus Pro lens here is actually quite expensive and I don't understand where that comes into anything. Anyway, to sum it up, I don't see the point of shooting everything wide open at f1.8, so I don't do it, so I don't have the need for it. So it's kind of a mute argument when it comes to me. So thank you very much for watching this little mess about shooting things on the beach with a Micro Four Thirds camera, just essentially sticking 2 fingers up at full frame. If you did enjoy the video, please do give it a thumbs up and a like, because it does help the video and it brings new viewers to see my content. And if you'd like to see more Micro Four Thirds depth of field goodness in the future, you can always press the subscribe button below me and you'll see more nonsense like that every single week. So until the next time, I'm going to love you and leave you and say peace and goodbye. I wonder if I can back off into sort of blurry oblivion. Let's find out.